I declare open this public hearing of the House Standing Committee on Industry, Innovation and Science for its inquiry into the current state of the Australian tyre industry and any challenges and opportunities for the industry within the context of the circular economy. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Noongar Nation people with the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders past and present. I remind all witnesses that giving evidence to the committee, they are protected by parliamentary privilege. It is unlawful for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of evidence given to a committee, and as such, action may be treated by the Parliament as contempt. In accordance with the committee's resolution of 6 August 2025, this hearing will be recorded and broadcast on the Parliament's website, and proof and official transcripts of proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. I also remind members of the media who may be present or listening on the web of the need to fairly and accurately report the proceedings of the committee. So today I now welcome representatives from CTS Tire Recycling to give evidence in this public hearing today. For the Hansard record, would you please each state your full name and the capacity in which you appear?
Mr. Sunil Kumar, General Manager at the CTS Tire Recycling.
Lee Committee, Managing Director, CTS Tire Recycling.
David Christensen, Registered Lobbyist, working with Lee and CTS Tire Recycling and his other companies.
Terrific. Although the committee does not require to give evidence under oath, I should advise you these hearings are a formal proceeding of the Parliament. Consequently, they warrant the same respect as proceedings of the Parliament itself. Giving false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. Would you like to make an opening short statement?
Yes. Thank you for the opportunity to appear here today. Without further support mechanisms, there are genuine concerns about the viability of the tyre recycling industry in Western Australia. There are fears that at least one facility like ours could close down due to the lack of support for improved tyre recycling regulations. There would be a gigantic backward step for environmental and circular economy outcomes in WA. The Commonwealth and WA governments are already co-funding the Recycling Modernisation Fund, RMF, with $70 million in grants in WA, with more than $22 million has been provided specifically for end-of-life tyre recycling projects, including the $8 million paid to our own company to support our overall investment to date of more than $51 million. There has been significant investments by us and other recyclers supported by those government grants in recycling facilities in Perth and the Pilbara for recovery of all tyre categories. However, the supply required to make these facilities viable in the longer term is being severely constrained by the WA government continuing to permit landfill disposal and stockpiles in the regions and on mine sites across the state. There is already an existing ban on sending tyres to landfill in the metropolitan area. Given the significant investment in the tyre recycling plants recently established in WA, supported by federal and state taxpayer grants, we believe there is a clear imperative for action that will result in the ban being extended to regional areas, farms and mine sites. Further, we suggest that it is abundantly clear that reviewing and changing licence renewals under current state agreements is an opportunity to make a real difference by progressively ending the practice by mining companies of burial or long-term storage of end-of-life tyres and conveyor belt. Clearly, if a mining tyre or conveyor belt is being delivered to a mine site, that the same transport method could return a matching end-of-life product, especially given that the backload transport charge has already been included in the delivery cost of new product. A recent report from the Productivity Commission suggested a ban would impose costs on mining companies and result in environmental impacts associated with transporting tyres from remote mines to recycling facilities, although it conceded there may be reverse logistics opportunities in some instances. The logical view is that all goods are transported to site and therefore it is not unreasonable or any way impractical to remove waste products for recycling. Tyre recyclers also dispute the report's claim that there is an absence of significantly developed end markets for recovered materials and products in Australia. That meant that wider economic and environmental benefits of efforts to increase collecting tyres cannot be realised at this time. At CTS Tire Recycling, we've invested in developing our own downstream markets for the reuse and remanufacture of the commodities that we have extracted from the used tyres. Given significant market capacity exists to process tyres of all sizes within WA, we would strongly suggest that even the largest mining companies would be hard-pressed to push back on such changes, given the increasing focus on the need for them to operate under social licence. In addition to reducing landfill, recycling and remanufacturing will reduce the need for procurement and planting further virgin rubber product, a key element of moves towards a sustainable circular economy.
Terrific. David, wasn't it?
No, I would say, Chair, that we do have printed copies of that opening statement. I know it's going on Hansard, but if you wish to review, there are printed copies with grace.
Terrific, thank you.
Could I also just take this opportunity to thank you for your visit yesterday and for the interest shown, and just reinforce the fact that the facility you visited yesterday is the only one in Australia that is capable of recycling every size tyre on this continent and then remanufacturing, producing new value-added products, all at one site. There is no other facility in the country that can do that.
Terrific, thank you. All right, we'll start off with some questions. You've argued that continued landfill disposals of tyres in WA is undermining viability and of the existing recycling infrastructure. So, with your experience, and we went through this, had a good look at this yesterday. What impact would an increase on the OTR recovery have on feedstock certainty and the utilisation of your facility?
Being able to access significant increased volumes in end of life mining and off the road tyres would materially underpin our facility, but also I think the whole sector within WA. There's a huge opportunity to extract those commodities and resources that are in those tyres, and we need those volumes in order to sustain our remanufacturing and processing capacity downstream, which is super important for the economic outcomes and social outcomes that we're trying to achieve for the environment and our own facility.
Terrific.
Yeah, I just want to thank you very much for having us out there yesterday. We were really privileged to visit 4 different facilities, and each a little bit different in their own right, and really appreciate just how much research and investment has gone into a facility that processes a really big challenge for our country and tyres. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about reverse logistics that we have discussed, and just around the timing, and you might not know the answer, but I'm just keen to know how long does it take? So you're taking a new tyre up to the Pilbara. What would be the changeover time to pull one of their tyres off and put it back on the truck and send it back? Like, how long would that take? Sorry.
Thanks for the question, Alison. In my experience, and I come from a tyre service background, a off-the-road tyre maintenance program operates a little bit different than, say, consumer tyre in your car. In a consumer tyre in your car, you drive your car in, you take the old tyres off, new tyre goes on. Same thing. Actually, the same thing happens on a mine site with off-the-road tyres, but there's a stockpile. So you have new tyres in stock, ready to go, and they go on the machine, and the old tyres go off, and then that's sort of in the workshop bay, which is different to like the stores area, if you like, or where you're receiving the tyres. So in a well organised facility, you'd have new tyres coming in on potentially one side of a yard or a laydown area, and then the waste tyres on the other. And the tyre handler, being quite productive, takes a new tyre off, places it in the receival area, and then picks up the old tyre in the next movement and loads it straight back on that trailer.
So there's no complexity to it?
No, that would be the ideal reverse logistics scenario, and I think quite practical. In my experience, it's, I think, how you do it naturally.
And the interesting element to that, Alison and others, is that the largest tyres that we're talking about, the ones with the most volume of recyclable material, are transported into site on purpose-built trailers. Most of them only carry 6 or 8 tyres. Those trailers can't carry any other product, so they're coming back anyway.
So they're coming back empty rather than bringing them with used tyres that would be quite easy to do.
And the mining companies and others have paid for that return journey
Yeah.
in any event.
And it's about 14 hours up to the Pilbara, isn't
Oh,
it?
it depends where you're going, but
Roughly, yeah.
14 to 18.
So that's a long time to bring back an empty truck that you could actually fill with.
Doesn't hurt the trucking company.
Yep.
They've charged the mining company for that journey.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I was never known as being politically correct. Like my Labor colleagues, I was very impressed with your facility yesterday, and I acknowledge, Mr. Committee, the investment that you have made in what I think is a visionary project. So thank you on behalf of the nation. I just wonder, I think landfill is one of our greatest moral and environmental challenges of our time. On the East Coast, we're filling up our local government council tips to the point where it is going to be a huge problem in the future. I just wonder, and I appreciate the size of Western Australia, I just wonder, is it even possible to put a national or even a state moratorium or edict on our mining companies and on others besides to ensure that every tyre gets recycled? That's my first point. The second point I'd ask is that should that be possible, and should we even go down that path, what sort of audit would be needed? Because you would imagine that mining companies, the Productivity Commission has already told us that it's going to cost mining companies big time. They would then say, oh, that pile of tyres over there was from 10 years ago. What sort of audit would you need to place on mining sites to ensure that the figures weren't, pardon the pun, rubbery?
Thanks for your kind words, Michael. It was great to host you on site yesterday. It's sending tyres to landfill in mine sites is one thing, but in regional landfills where that's happening, that is probably a greater travesty because it's consuming what is effectively a scarce or a finite resource or amount of space.
100%.
And burying end-of-life tyres makes little sense when we have such a large and sophisticated recycling sector within our state, and also nationally it exists. So a mandate to ban the burial of tyres makes perfect sense. It's in the environment's best interests, and it's in the best interests of the community at large. In regards to how a mine site would have to, or how we'd have to audit that, there's a lot of environmental regulation and management of storage of waste on sites generally. So I think there's probably enough protection in place for that. If there was a ban on the landfill, the tyres would either have to be, I guess, illegally exported or dealt with in a legal fashion, or end up in the recycling streams. And we have the capacity there. A light touch is actually quite practical. We don't need excessive government regulation in order to get these outcomes. What's required is a ceasing of the ability to bury tyres.
And you think it should be at a national level?
Absolutely.
You think the onus should be on the federal government to bring in this mandate rather than the states who, by your submission and by your opening statement this morning, I can read into that you don't think WA is doing enough?
We have end-of-life tyres are a catastrophe nationally. Consumers are doing amazingly well. We see these really high collection rates, but there's opportunity for users of larger tyres in particular, and in some parts of the economy, truck and transport as well, to improve those circular outcomes. And a national approach to banning landfill would be fantastic, but would equally be happy for WA to take the lead on that too, Michael.
You've obviously travelled across the country just to get the business model for what you've set up here, even though I appreciate you are from this state. Do you think that would work elsewhere in the country? And do you think that there's enough tyres, enough of a problem, and enough political will, I put the emphasis on that at the end, to bring this about?
There's certainly enough tyres. The recycling industry...
To make it profitable.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's critical that we have a sustainable sector.
Model.
And if we look at WA specifically, that's the real risk. We've all been a benefactor, all the major players have been a benefactor of joint state and federal funding through the Recycling Modernisation Fund. The capacity to recycle every single tyre within our state is here, and it's now. We all have large-scale facilities. You've been to them all yesterday. We're all breathing the same air. We're here, ready to respond to that end-of-life tyre recycling challenge. So the capacity is there, but at the moment, the volume on the way up is not there. It's constricted, and that makes, I think, some of our facilities not viable in its current form.
If I may, through the chair, Michael, the other element of that, of course, is that you have current state agreements in place, and I doubt very much that any federal government would simply trample all over those. But it could well help to influence state authorities to examine those agreements each time a 5-year renewal comes up. So those 5-year renewals look at the conditions placed on the mining agreement. And one of those in every state agreement is the disposal of waste.
So what just following on from Michael's question, as part of that, so we know the regulatory or licence changes at state levels would be the effective shift, but what regulations would need to be changed to enable to be able to work right across the board and address?
It would, in each state, with respect, it would come down to the state authority that issued that licence. There are Commonwealth environmental approvals that sit above all of those, but I think you'll find the mechanism for allowing, and we're talking here burial or storage or stockpiling, is at a state level. So it would require both government levels to agree. But again, these state authorities have a mechanism to stop landfill of end-of-life tyres, rubber tracks, conveyor belts in their purview already each time they go to a condition renewal.
Thank you. One of the things that I've seen in the mining industry is a tendency to have stockpiles of their waste products, and then sometimes, depending on the commodity prices, they go and mine those waste stockpiles. The thing that I see with the market at the moment is effectively there's a market failure for our mining tyres, let's call it that. If from a business model perspective, I'm curious to understand if there was one thing that either the state or federal government did that would be transformative for your business, what would it be? But I'm going to say on the opposite, what would be potentially a damaging thing that the federal government could do that would be damaging to your business model? I'm kind of wanting to know the parameters of...
I'm not sure there's anything that federally could be done that would be
catastrophic.
You know, what you say,
Great.
damaging to that
Great.
extent.
Great.
But at certainly at the state government level, what we've just enunciated would be the biggest change.
State agreements?
State agreements.
Change agreements.
Yeah.
Changes to state agreements to say that you can't bury your tyres.
Well, you're not changing, sorry, with respect, you're not changing the state agreement.
Yeah.
You are altering a condition within that agreement. So at the moment they have, 9 categories of waste, I think, in most of the state agreements. One of those is end-of-life tyres, but it also relates to garbage from the kitchens. It relates to bottles and cans and cups and broken crockery, building materials. So,
with the state agreements, I know that there often been tools that have been talked about to try and bring about positive change. And I remember a campaign 15 years ago which was about increasing the amount of local content that we saw for our resource companies to do that. Have you seen good examples of updates to state agreements that have brought about positive change? Because they're very confidential, the public doesn't get to see them, and so I'm wondering if there's good stories associated with those.
Not in our space.
not in our space, but certainly, the container deposit fund program. All the mining companies are now contributing to that, generally in concert with their nearest local community. And that's great, because there are an awful lot of 10-cent cans and bottles that go through a 3,000 worker mine camp each week. So a lot of those are now being channelled back through local communities, which is absolutely fantastic, because previously they too would have gone to landfill.
Great.
But we'd just love to see it done with end-of-life tyres, tracks, conveyor belt machines, conveyor belts.
And with your facility, how many tyres or tonnes are you operating at per year, and how much could you operate at if you had infinite feedstock?
We have current capacity of 30,000 tonnes per annum, and we can very easily scale that up to 60,000 tonnes. We're a large-scale facility.
Cool.
And 60,000 tonnes is, a lot of big tyres from mine sites when you think that they're between 4 and 5 tonne each.
And what are your most profitable products?
The best way, yeah. So our business model will thrive when we develop further our innovative manufacturing, the value adding products that we're beginning to make, that you saw yesterday, and that we're continuing to invest in, and I think we'll continue to invest in that into perpetuality. Tire recycling has been on a journey for quite some time, where it effectively was just a pure waste disposal, and we're developed into a actual genuine recycling sector. You'll hear in these inquiry meetings, I'm sure, about tire-derived fuel, and that's a big question mark over whether we're genuinely recycling, and people ask a lot of questions about that. To go up the value hierarchy, you need to invest in that innovative manufacturing, and that's what we're doing under our 6,000 square metre roof in Nirrabub. And that's definitely provides us with the best economic outcomes and the best environmental outcomes as well.
As does rubber crumb being used as binder in asphalt mix.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, so just going back to reverse logistics, it seems a little bit common sense to me. Why are companies not doing that at the moment? Is there a good reason? It doesn't seem to be cost or availability of transport. And the second thing is, if we were going to put a ban on long-term storage and burial, what would be a reasonable time frame to allow companies to adjust to that, do you think?
So in regards to the logistics, there's not a logistics problem.
So why don't they do it?
Because they don't want to pay the money to recycle tyres. It's not free to bury tyres on site. There is a machinery cost, there is a labour cost, but it is immaterial to their operations, and it's significantly cheaper than doing the right thing and recycling that end-of-life product.
So how much would it cost for them to recycle per tyre?
Approximately 10, 12, 15% of the tyre's value, depending on the size. So it's quite a reasonable price to get a great outcome.
What's the cost of a tyre, like some of those tyres that we saw at your facility, the biggest one, for example?
30 to $60,000, depending how big they are.
You said 10% of that?
Yeah.
Okay, and the reasonable time frame to allow?
Well, I think a staged approach would make sense. So maybe a great outcome would be a very strong message and signal to the market and the community and industry as a whole that there will be a time when there will be no permits issued to bury. You can't bury. So I think it would be reasonable to maybe give 12 months notice that there'll be no further permits issued, or that they'll no longer be permitted. And then I just think as those permits expire over time, you can't renew them, and there's an orderly solution to the problem. We as a sector have the capacity to process. And in fairness, 2 years ago, that capacity didn't exist. So we're all here now able to help with the problem, but 2 years ago we weren't. So a staged approach to banning that burial of end-of-life tyres would make sense.
And I think it's interesting to add that, and this is not apocryphal, that at mine site level, the people who manage tyre use, and they have tyre managers, and the environmental staff on site are all happy to send the tyres back. It's only when it gets to somebody's budget line that the company says, nah, stick them in a pile.
Because you've got the $3 or
Or stick them in a pit.
$3,000 to $6,000.
Yeah. And look, I think the truth is, if one of the big miners came to us now and said, we will send all of our tyres back, Lee would quite happily negotiate on that charge.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's indicative rather than actual.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, when I was a kid, wasn't that many years ago, and you used to climb the monkey bars and fall off. At best you got an abrasion, at worst you broke your arm. These days they've got these wonderful rubber mats and whatnot to protect your fall. There is a debate though about artificial playing fields and the sort of floor coverings that your foyer has about its safety, I note, in the public arena. What provisions, what steps have you taken to ensure the safeguards of the products that you're producing? And I know you put a lot of work into R&D, so it's a bit of a Dorothy Dixer, but how do you counter that argument that it's not all good and
So that
proper?
That discussion arose from a non-peer reviewed report that speculated about the problems that could be faced by children falling onto a artificial playing surface and ingesting rubber crumb. That's where it came from, and we were asked about it. There is a peer-reviewed report, and I'm not sure whether I'm absolutely correct. It's either by Johns Hopkins or by one of the other major teaching hospitals in the United States that debunks that claim or that suggestion. So we don't...
Could you perhaps provide that, David? Would that be appropriate, perhaps, as something that you could follow up on for us?
And just furthermore, Michael, on that one, when people ask me what we do at our tyre recycling business, where do the products go? Most people immediately think about playgrounds because it's in the public arena. We've been walking on that sort of surface for some time. That's not our best use of our products.
No.
So our business is not reliant on playgrounds. We'll never be economically sustainable. We won't be able to survive if we're relying on playgrounds as being our sole downstream solution. Yeah, where we're really investing heavily is in more higher tech manufacturing. And yes, it's rubber. It's not exciting. We're not in the Silicon Valley. However, all these products that we're making, we're not exactly reinventing. We're building them onshore. We're manufacturing them within Western Australia or Australian-made products, and these are products that are currently being imported from Southeast Asia or Eastern Europe. So we're effectively taking other people's waste by way of importing these products. Whereas with us and others, when we're using these commodities that come from the end-of-life tyres, we're actually using our own waste. We're creating value, and we're stopping the importation of somebody else's.
you want to tell us a little bit about your products?
Yeah, so at this stage, we do have the commodity-based products that we sell in the form of like rubber crumb and powders into the spray, seal and bitumen markets. When we go to our own manufacturing and our customers and partners manufacturing, we're moulding products out of that material. So we're moulding cylinders that become acoustic underlay matting. We're making gym tiling. We're making load restraint matting for the transport industry. We're just about to start a project where we're making some sort of brick alternative type moulded bricks.
And the acoustics tiling goes into every...
Yeah, so under the hard floor, in multi-storey buildings, under all hard surfaces, there's some form of acoustic underlay, and rubber is one of those forms. It's a big market, and that's where we're focusing a lot of attention because it takes a lot of volume, so it provides really great circular outcomes.
And if you stepped it up from 30,000 to 60,000 tonnes per annum, how many direct and indirect jobs would that create, and how many people are you employing now?
We're currently employing 30. If we went to 60,000 tonnes, we'd be working our facility very hard. So we'd be 7-day, 24/7 operations. So we would probably more than double that, especially the real opportunity for employment is the downstream products. So if we have more people buying and using made in Australia products, rubber products that we're manufacturing, that really would turbocharge our jobs. There'd be an extra 20 or 30 jobs merely in the manufacturing side.
Well, I read where the government is pushing a made in Australia agenda, so that's good.
In relation to rubber crumb, my understanding is that in the European Union that they're in the process of not incorporating that into their roads because of concerns around the chemicals that are leached from that. Do you guys have particular views on that? And do you think the products that you make, the shift of that might change depending on consumer expectations?
That is a good question. Look, as a society, we've had this waste tyre problem. How do we deal with that? And the road industry, especially in West Australia, main roads has been an absolute leader in Australia really. And roads are one of the areas where we managed to find some downstream markets that we can use recycled tyre content in. We were talking about playgrounds earlier, and there's some questions around playgrounds. I think everything we're doing in this space at times gets questioned, but we're at the start of that journey of what we can do with these recycled products and how we can use that rubber as opposed to virgin rubber to manufacture or to reuse within Australia. And I think that's the opportunity, and that's what we should be focusing on rather than constantly questioning what we have established. Like, we're scaffolding a solution here. And everybody's sort of focusing on what can we do with this commodity, and can we manufacture it, can we keep it within Australia and keep it out of landfill, keep it out of less favourable streams.
You recommended mandatory accreditation for tyre recycling under a national framework. So how would that improve the environmental, the safety outcomes compared to the mix that we've got now, and how would you resource that enforcement?
So, ATRA members in particular, the Australian Tire Recycling Association members, we have, especially in Western Australia, all large-scale facilities, heavy investment, and we're all doing the right thing. We're asking that anybody else in the sector invests in the same way and provides credibility to what we're doing as a recycling industry. That's what we're calling for there.
No, all good. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your attendance today. You've been asked to provide additional information. If you could get that to the Secretary by the 18th of May would be fantastic. You will be sent a copy of the transcript for your evidence and have an opportunity to request any corrections to transcription errors. Again, thank you for yesterday. It was fantastic. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Have a good one.
Back to work.
Thank you. CTS done. Done. Thank you. All right, I now welcome the representatives from Elan Energy Matrix to give evidence at this public hearing today. For the Hansard record, would you each please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear?
Thanks very much. Ian Bellinge, Managing Director, Land Energy Matrix.
Good morning, thanks very much. Hamish Arthur, Consultant at Elan Energy Matrix.
Thank you. Although the committee does not require to give evidence under oath, I should advise that these hearings are a formal proceeding of the Parliament. Consequently, they warrant the same respect as proceedings of the Parliament itself. Giving false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. Would you like to make an opening statement?
We wouldn't, thank you.
Terrific.
Chair, Deputy Chair and other members of the committee, thank you for having us here today. I would like to publicly acknowledge members of the committee and the Secretary for making the time to visit our site yesterday. That was lovely, really informative, and it was great to see you all there. For the purpose of Hansard, Land Energy Matrix operates an advanced tyre recycling resource recovery facility, a tyre recycling plant located in Welshpool, WA. We employ approximately 25 people, and we are in the process of expanding our tyre recycling operations to all other Australian states and territories. Since establishment in 2012, we have invested more than $20 million in infrastructure and capital investments. Elan Energy Matrix currently recycles on average of 40 tonnes of tyres each day. We operate in everything which is produced recycled material, with the added benefit of our machinery being powered by an on-site 100 kilowatt solar electricity system. Every inch we try and do counts in our recycling sector. The two most important points for this inquiry that we'd like to make are that Elan Energy Matrix is strongly opposed to Australia introducing a mandatory product stewardship scheme for recycling of waste tyres, and there are risks, including risks to human health, with the use of waste tyres being converted to crumb rubber, and a far safer approach to recovery of waste tyres is the use of pyrolysis technology. Currently, 89% of passenger and commercial use tyres, this being the truck and bus use and passenger tyre market, are recovered in Australia. While this percentage for off-the-road tyres or mining tyres is only between 8 to 12%, therefore the only segment of Australian waste tyre market where intervention is justified on the basis of market failure is the off-the-road mining tyres. The major reasons why we are so strongly opposed to Australia introducing any form of mandatory product stewardship scheme for recycling of waste tyres are that tyre recycling is a fragile and ecosystem, and mandatory product stewardship will threaten the viability of many small tyre recycling companies, including our company. If companies like ours go out of business, only the very biggest company is likely to survive, and if this happens, the percentage of waste tyres recovered will decrease. In turn, this will result in worse outcomes for the environment. Innovation in tyre recycling would nosedive. If there is to be change which is designed to improve the percentage of waste tyres which are recycled, the focus of such change must be stronger enforcement of existing laws, including landfill of waste tyres and disposal input of mining tyres must be banned. All tyres imported into Australia must be linked to an accredited tyre recycler. Australia's export ban on whole-baled waste tyres must be adequately enforced. Introducing compulsory sorting of tyres at the point where they become waste tyres to help streamline recycling. and consideration should be given to establishing designated waste tyre collection points. To be clear, Tyre Stewardship Australia does not represent the tyre recycling industry. By lobbying for a mandatory product stewardship scheme, Tyre Stewardship Australia is unfairly seeking to shift the blame from dumping of waste tyres from tyre manufacturers to tyre recyclers. On the safety of crumb rubber, there are microplastic risks associated with the use of waste tyre crumb rubber in synthetic turf, soft fall playgrounds, sporting fields, asphalt manufacturing and road construction, and this extends to microplastic risks to human health. In 2023, the European Commission introduced a ban on the use of waste tyre crumb rubber as infill for synthetic turf sporting fields because of concerns about impacts to living organisms in the environment, including human health risks. As crumb rubber is used for synthetic turf for sporting fields and playgrounds in Australia, there are questions about whether users of these facilities are being exposed to unacceptable health risks. Given this, it raises the question about whether a similar ban on the use of crumb rubber infill for synthetic turf in Australia should also be considered. A far safer approach to recovery of waste tyres is pyrolysis technology. Pyrolysis, which involves heating tyres at more than 500 degrees centigrade in the absence of oxygen to create a liquid, which can be refined to biofuels, fuel additives, petrochemical replacements, is a far healthier and environmentally friendly process, which our land is moving towards. Thank you. We're happy to take your questions.
Terrific. I'll start off with the mandatory product stewardship scheme. You say it'll reduce recycling outcomes. Can you explain with reference to market dynamics why regulation would decrease recovery rates, particularly in OTR tyres, and how we get these sort of poorer outcomes for recycling rates in the environment and the community?
So ultimately, a mandatory product stewardship scheme will result in a lower percentage of waste tyres being recycled than is currently the case. This is because there will be a lower tyre recycling fee, gate fee, associated, which makes it commercially unviable for smaller tyre recyclers to continue to operate, leaving one or two large players to fill the market. Now, this is shown within models like in British Columbia, where there were multiple, and it's now down to one. This will result in lower percentage of tyres being recycled, and it will lose the motivation for innovation in this tyre recycling sector. When it comes to the mining tyres, that is a separate industry to what we're referring to in regards to passenger and truck tyres. A mandatory market on that, though, still will only create a gate fee that is acceptable for a quick and easy recycled product. Now, I say recycled product because the sector and lobbyists of the manufacturers and importers like Tyre Stewardship Australia will say crumb rubber is a recycling sector. We feel that is not the case. And to claim that it is, it would be detriment to Australians' health down the track.
Okay. And with TSA, you say that it doesn't adequately represent the recyclers. So what, in your view, should happen to get recyclers, to change that view?
For recyclers to change the view of TSA?
Yeah. So, well, they don't adequately represent, so what would you do? What could the TSA do itself, do you think, that would actually help address that?
Well, the TSA has a mandate that they should have a tyre recycler on their board as part of their committee, which they have constantly denied a tyre recycler to be on the board because of commercial conflict of interest. However, Australian Tyre Recyclers Association, or ATRA, has an executive officer that has no commercial interest within an individual tyre recycling company. He should be allowed to sit on the board, but he's been rejected multiple times. So if they truly think they want to include the tyre recyclers, they should have someone on their board for that reason.
Yep. Sure. Oh.
Thanks for yesterday. You told us yesterday, and you again put the point this morning, the pyrolysis technology is a far safer approach. Can you please elaborate on that and tell us a bit about the research and development that you've done with your company to ensure that the method that you're using for tyre recycling is the best method?
Thanks very much, Deputy Chair. Great question. Our research started 12 years ago into what is actually made out of a tyre. It is lots of literature out there saying tyres are inert, tyres are safe, they're perfectly okay. However, delving down purely in literature sense, do data mining, the chemical components found in tyres are not great. We have engaged CSIRO, we've engaged Curtin University, we've engaged University of Western Australia, all to do tests on tyre crumb, carbon matrix, which is the pyrolysis output, to determine what are the scopes within these tyres. When we've done trials within our pyrolysis technology, we do mass balance as well. And mass balance is the reasoning for how we can get our state licence to operate our facility. That mass balance identifies all the different chemical compounds that are associated within the tyre. That is how we know there are things like arsenic, cadmium, aluminium, silica, all the way through the tyres. Now that composition does change, but those chemicals are still there. And the biggest concern with any product currently is the sulphur content, because sulphur is used to create the rigidity of the tyre. Our research is not just done within house. We have used external consultants all the way through. Things like the crumb rubber report that we've issued, that was done with an external consultant group that was internally peered within that consultant group to ensure that they are producing a report that is defined and accurate, and it is not a test of the crumb rubber or the tyre itself. It is a literature report. It is using data from many other sectors around the world, using the US EPA, for example, as one of those sectors, using the EU as another sector, to try and determine what is the best outcome, not just for Australia, but based on world data, to determine how we can make the best outcome for our technology and the best products from tyres. Because at the end of the day, we don't want at a land here to be making a product and 10 years down the track end up as another asbestos concern.
Okay, thank you.
How would you feel about the banning of mining tyres going to landfill?
We would welcome that, 100%.
And so at the moment, from a market perspective, would you say that mining tyres is the biggest issue from a market value perspective?
The mining tyres are the biggest issue from a market perspective because places like Kalgoorlie, where mining is prevalent, the Kalgoorlie tip site is full of mining tyres and then buried and buried and buried because they're a cheaper alternative. By seeing tyres there, it allows the general public to identify, well, if that's how tyres are used, we can put tyres there as well. So the mining sector has almost a figurehead approach to this as well. They're the ones that start the landfill. The consumer public will follow, because if they do it and they've got the resources to recycle, but they're not doing it properly, why would Joe Blow do it? So if we just stop mining tyres being banned in landfill, there would have to be a staged approach, and the previous session identified a way to do that. But this is not just a WA problem. The Eastern States has got a big mining sector as well. So, and there's nothing over there at this point in time. To build a facility that can take that sort of level of mining tyres into a ban, that would have to be a 5-year approach, because one facility would not be able to do it. The time it takes for processing one of those very large tyres is quite extensive. Cal Tire over in Chile does a OTR pyrolysis facility, and that works quite well. But that is a whole tyre component after it's been chopped up into 3 pieces, essentially. It is a timely process. They're not built overnight. They're not going to get destroyed overnight. They are a very, very difficult process to recycle. So there has to be time and an action plan associated with this. I believe the industry can produce that action plan because we're all invested in this. However, we need feedback from the mines to identify what tonnes they have on site. And that could be done simply by a spot audit on site, a walk around as it were. and then how many tonnes are produced within that site. And so then we can then ascertain how can we get those tyres down from that site in a logistics fashion to process in our facilities. It creates a conversation across both industries.
Who would do that audit, if you don't mind? Who would do that audit? And what's your view on state and federal responsibilities in this regard?
I think the federal government has enough on its plate, and the state has the capacity to do these audits. If you look at landfill in its own sense, landfill is audited yearly based on amount of tonnes that are produced in the landfill and the compact levels. That's a spot site done on a yearly basis through the state's EPA. A state EPA could easily go to a mine site and do a spot check of tyres or request a report from the mines to say, give us a valuation of how many tyres you have on site. It's a data report that should be done on a monthly basis, if not yearly basis. It's not a complicated process. And I think the state EPA has enough component to be able to do that. We have within WA here a controlled waste tracking system already. So if that system was introduced on mines going into site, and when those tyres come off the equipment, they are noted down within that system, there you have your data already.
Can you, and we visited your site yesterday, when you get your paralysis equipment up and running at full capacity, how many tyres, how many tonnage could you process per annum?
So our licence at the moment is to run Monday to Friday, because we wanted to ensure that we could get the process up and running in a safe manner. And to run 24/7 would be a detriment off the bat, because if there were breakdowns or maintenance issues, we'd want to have that flexibility to shut down and do it on the weekend. We don't want to have to run it and run it and run it without disregard for the environment. Our current capacity is 13,500 tonnes, I should say, per annum. But if we were to go 24/7, 7 days a week for 330 days of the year, with a 30-day shutdown for repairs and maintenance, then our capacity would be 22,000 tonnes a year.
And jobs-wise, I know you told us yesterday, but just for the Hansard record.
So we currently have 25 staff. To run pyrolysis, we'd have to double that straight away. So we'd have to go to 50 staff, because pyrolysis runs 24 hours a day. Even though it is Monday to Friday, it's still a 24-hour period. And we need multiple shifts for that. We'll need at least a minimum of 3 people on site at a time, and that's 4 shifts, a night and day shift, doing a fortnightly basis. But then you've got to have operators on site, and then you have to have management and engineering staff that probably know a bit more about it than I do.
Thank you.
One of the things you spoke about yesterday was some of the tyres that you received having the metal rim within the middle of it and the challenges that posed for your recycling business. Is there any regulation required around there, or that's just one of the challenges?
So that goes to my opening statement, where if it could be a compulsory sorting of tyres at the point where they become purely just the waste tyre, does that involve a regulation? No, I don't think so. I think that
just
involves
best practice. Or?
I think it's a best practice, and it's more of a commerciality approach. If we were to say to them, if a landfill was banned, and we knew those tyres were going to have to come to us, we could then turn back to the customer or consumer and say, if you feel like you want to keep that metal rim completely entrapped in there, there is going to be an additional charge.
Okay, yep.
Because of a labour cost to remove that from our end.
So
then
nothing
it becomes a
required.
market commerciability factor rather than a regulated factor.
Yeah, so nothing required at our level, the state government level. And just secondly, just going back to putting a ban on burial or long-term storage for mining sites, should that apply to farming as well, or is it just mining that you're having difficulty with? And if you were going to put in the ban, how long would you think is reasonable for companies to adjust?
I think farming should also be included in that ban as well. Speaking to farmers, every farmer has a tip on site.
And they can do reverse logistics as well.
everyone can do reverse logistics.
Okay, yep.
That's not the problem. The problem is just what's an easy solution for them? There's a big hole at the back. Let's throw it down there.
Yeah.
That to me is dangerous, because if anyone's ever walked around a farm and picked up one of those old tyres, it's really crusty and hard.
Yep.
Because that oil component that's in the tyre has leached out. And where does that leach out? It leaches into the soil.
Yeah.
Eventually that soil will get trapped into the water table.
Yep.
And then the farmer's own cattle will drink that. Now, there might be minute factors at this point in time, but at the rate we're going and the rate that those landfills are building up and up, as the Deputy Chair explained over East, that water table will just get more and more damaged.
Yeah, so it should be general across the board.
Across the board.
So with pesticide containers, farmers, they have these periods where an amnesty where they all go and dump them off, and it doesn't cost them anything, and it works well.
Yeah, yeah.
To that point, Deputy Chair, we do work with some councils that have that same amnesty with tyres, where they have an open day.
Yep.
And public is one day a year allowed to go and drop off tyres, and we allow our trucks to be there with some staff to load up those tyres. And then the council is charged, but the charge that we charge them versus the cost if those tyres were taken out and dumped, for example, is about 10% of what that charge would be. So it's us working together with councils for that reason.
Yeah, because that would affect like whether you did it through licence renewals for mine sites or how you might put in place a ban, I guess.
And that again comes down to a state department level.
Yeah.
To determine should we allow this licence to be renewed. They should in turn be talking to the tyre recycling sector and going, what is the capacity of your site? And have you got capacity? If we were to shut down or renege, I should say, on a licence where they have got, through our data, through the controlled waste tracking, X amount of tonnes on site and they bring in X amount of tonnes a year, if we were to shut that down and they were forced to your facility, have you got the capacity? And that becomes a yes, no. And that becomes then a working with that site, because you're not going to clean it all up on day one.
Yeah, yeah.
It'll be an approached a logistics plan to determine how often we get those tyres down. The second question that you asked in the time frame, I believe 5 years is a time frame that is required for multiple facilities to get up around Australia for the mining sector.
Yep.
But those facilities will never be even sought after from a land perspective, determine on what site to build until that time frame is put in place. Like an EU time frame on the ban of crumb rubber, it is done over 2031 is the ban. So when there's a time frame to be adhered to, you give industry a chance to make their mark on it.
Yeah, and just with regard to the health risks, you spoke about that before. Previously, we'd heard that basically it's falling off equipment and ingesting it, I think. Do you have any comments around the health risks?
The health risk with regard to crumb rubber in playgrounds.
Yes.
So the problem with crumb rubber in playgrounds is they are small bits of rubber flakes that are just bound together by glue. It's just a binding agent. Now, I don't know about your kids. My kids are pretty rough, so they will destroy anything.
No.
But they will constantly chip away at this, and it breaks up, and the binder breaks up. Now, we found in Moore Park that they've identified that in New South Wales, that has a risk on their playgrounds and sporting fields. So they reverted back to a natural product of cork. Now, that will break up as well. Nothing is forever.
Yeah.
Unless you want to put concrete down, that's probably not great for the kids. And even then...
Or cows yesterday was so too.
What was that, Chair?
I said, you look like you survived a few falls at the concrete.
It's a rough head.
So everything is wearable.
Yeah.
And how do we treat that? Unfortunately, there are playgrounds that are close to water sources.
Yeah, that's a real challenge, yeah.
And when they're crumbed away, and those bits of crumb hit our water courses and go to the tables or go out to our oceans,
Microplastics. And
it becomes a microplastic issue again.
Absolutely.
Exactly right. And that is where crumb rubber should be introduced as within Australia, as it is in the EU, as a microplastic.
Can you just for Hansard talk about the investment and the technology with your pyrolysis device, as in how good this is for Australian manufacturing and recycling and environmental outcomes, etc.? It's a bit of a Dorothy Dixon, but go your hardest. Impress me.
I'll try. I'm a tyre recycler, I'm no poet. So our technology, we feel, is very advanced. It is not, its purpose is not just tyres. Pyrolysis is not a technology that is new to this world. Pyrolysis is how we got oil in our ground. It's done through millions of years. What we've done is we've just sped up that process. Now, we've done it through R&D. We started off with a desktop model, determined, does it work? Yes, it does. What we then did is we went and built a large commercial plant at 100 kilo an hour. It was about 40 metres long, straight line methodology to see, once that works, can we actually get this off the ground? That did work. It produced a good quality oil and a good quality carbon. It did show us that our steel in the tyres needs to be extracted first, so that's why we went down that path of extracting the steel prior. I spent many years going around the world looking at different pyrolysis plants, and there are some in third world countries where they use offcuts of tyres to fuel said pyrolysis plant, which is just burning coal in the sense. I went to other places around, for example in America, they had a beautiful pyrolysis plant, but it was designed for wood chips, to make a good biochar wood chip out of it. Our technology is not just done within our own company. Like I said, we've used likes of CSIRO, JBS&G Environmental Consultants, University of West Australia, Curtin University. We've engaged oil exports over east. We've engaged ex-Bridgestone pyrolysis experts that have done this study on OTR tyres in Japan. We haven't just plucked an idea off our head and thought we'll run with it and tell the world. We specifically made sure that we won't go out with big banners and yell what we're doing until we prove this is 100% correct. It's only because of this inquiry that we've decided to really step out and go, this is the model, the way to go. Because we've done all this research, we've done all the mass balance, we've got a licence through our state EPA, through our Department of Environment. We've done the mass balances. We know the technology works. It is literally the next step to tyre recycling, and it's not just that either. Pyrolysis also is worked within Austin, Texas. They use it specifically for plastics and styrofoams to create an oil. That oil then gets reproduced back into the plastics and styrofoams that they use within the community for their takeaway containers. We are not the only ones doing this. There are companies in the Netherlands that have invested $500 million in tyre pyrolysis, with the likes of BP and Shell investing into them. There are companies in Germany that are doing pyrolysis, companies moving over to the US from that. This is not Elan are the only ones doing this, we can save the world. We are just the first ones in Australia doing it to a model that we think is commercially and environmentally sound. Thank you.
Chair? Yep. I sense that in the tyre recycling industry, there, like maybe from your perspective, there's a hierarchy of value that you can get out of our tyres and, let's say, sophistication, but maybe also value in our communities. Do you have a sense that, like, would you agree with that, and would you almost list like the products that you could make in a particular hierarchy? But the additional thing that I'm curious to understand is, we've talked a little bit about crumb rubber. From the products that you're making, what do you see as the environmental impact of those products if they are used or degraded? So it's kind of two separate questions.
Thank you. I'll start by talking about what I believe a good hierarchy would be in the current market that's available of recycled rubber products. So obviously the pyrolysis products of oil and carbon, they are then recovered raw materials. That is just replacing the virgin raw materials of oil and carbon coal that comes out of the ground. So the process is available to that. They just become form of another manufacturing line. And those manufacturing lines are already dealing with those virgin materials, so therefore they should be able to use the recovered raw materials. If we then look down the scale of what's the NESPEC's practice, we're going into an area where you could say rubber matting could be well and good. But to me, that's just kicking the can down the road, because once that rubber matting is used up, where do you go with that? And unfortunately, that technology of how you recycle that rubber is not there because of the glue and the binders involved in it. You can't put that and then put it through the pyrolysis machine and get a decent quality product out of that, because you've added additional ingredients into it now through the binder. Then you go the next step of rubber crumb being and using asphalt and that sort of stuff, and that's even worse from my point of view, because then you've got other ingredients, even more chemicals, as well as rocks and gravel going into the rubber to extract that. So that'll end up in landfill as well. And then you've got shred, or tyre-derived fuel, which is used as a replacement for coal. That, to me, is not a long-term solution, especially if Australia wants to hit our 2030 targets. That must be worked out. That cannot be the only way we just go, well, if it's not a rubber crumb, it must be coal substitute instead. They're not answers. They're just the current uses.
Are you producing oil at the moment?
We've shut our machine down
Yeah.
to do more implementation of safety components for it. We want to ensure that we're not doing it just to make a dollar at the end of the day. We're doing it to ensure we're making an environmentally safe product at the end of the day.
Cool.
I'm good. There you go, perfect. Got off easy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And again, thank you for yesterday. It was great.
And we'll provide a copy of the statement to the Secretariat as well. So
Yeah, terrific. That'd be fantastic. So,
thank you for the opportunity to appear.
just to close, thank you for your attendance today. If you've been asked to provide any additional information, please forward to the Secretariat by 18th of May 2026. You'll be sent a copy of the transcript for your evidence and have an opportunity to request corrections to transcription errors. Again, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Okay, thanks Ian, thanks Hamish.
Yep, thanks. It's been until 10:30. All right, so we'll declare the hearing open. I now welcome a representative from Rubber Gem to give evidence in the public hearing today. For the Hansard record, could you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear?
Corey Matters, Managing Director of Rubber Gem.
Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I should advise you these hearings are a formal proceeding of the Parliament. Consequently, they warrant the same respect as proceedings of Parliament itself. Giving false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. Would you like to make an opening statement, Corey?
No.
No, all good. Good. Thank you for yesterday. We appreciated that. You went there and seeing what you guys are doing. So, yeah, it was really good. So we'll go straight to questions then. Do you want to start off?
Just for the Hansard record, we saw yesterday your facility, and thank you for the investment that you're making, not just in plant, but in people. I think it's really important, and this inquiry, we hope it brings about some good outcomes to assist the commitment that you've made, not just in the recent past, but over a career, because that's to be noted. But can you, just for Hansard, walk us through the process from when a tyre or a conveyor belt arrives at your amenity and the time it leaves?
Okay, so the process is really we identify what the material is. So whether that's a truck tyre, passenger tyre, or conveyor belt, and so forth, and then we segregate that for storage. Is basically the first step of the process. We also record where that material has come from and other aspects of that material, such as its weight and the type of material it is, for records and for chain of custody reporting. From there, we determine
what's the legal requirement.
It's part of our reporting to DEWA for annual reporting, and some of our mining clients require that as well. From there, we determine what's the best outcome we can with this material type. So whether it's a conveyor belt, we determine the best path of processing, and same with all the other materials. Essentially, there it goes into a shredding and granulation process, whichever material that may be, which eventually we break it down as far as we can, which is generally 0.6 of a millimetre. From there on, it goes into a further evaluating process where we have a devulcanisation plant where we devulcanise the rubber, which then is moulded and cured into a finished product ready for either the domestic market in Australia or international markets.
Tell us about your products.
Well, the products are agricultural flooring products, so that's like I said yesterday, though, we've only been in production with those products since February, and what we manufacture at the moment is the agricultural flooring products for the dairy, equestrian and beef sectors, both for Australia and international. We can also produce rubber for reuse into new products for other manufacturers, such as tyre manufacturers or conveyor belt manufacturers, or just general rubber goods. So those manufacturers can use our product as an ingredient for their manufacturing processes.
And your plant's very new, and you've invested a lot of technology into it. Can you talk about kind of like what it was before and what you have now, and the reason why you made that investment?
Okay, so we operate two facilities. So the one that you visited yesterday at Inns Rockingham is the new facility. The other facility, which is in a suburb called Naval Base, has been there. We've had that business now for 23 years. So that was really the start where we were focused on processing conveyor belt. Now, this expansion had to come about because we got to a point where a lot of the conveyor belt we were receiving was not good enough quality to manufacture our core product, which is also a dairy flooring product. So we were just accumulating a lot of unprocessable materials. And to get these materials from the mining industry, we were always sort of under pressure to take all of the material or nothing at all. Okay, so in our first, say 10 years roughly, the low-grade material that we were receiving, we did have an outlet for it. It was exported to China where it would be processed, but that was come to an end. China banned those types of materials being allowed into their country, such as waste tyres and conveyor belts, so that market came to an end. So all of a sudden we had a big issue of what are we going to do with all the low-grade material. So it was basically a 10-year process to assess how are we going to deal with this, what are we going to manufacture, how are we actually going to manufacture these products, what technologies are available. So it was basically a very long process of assessment of how are we going to deal with this waste. So it ended up being a lot bigger project than we really wanted it to be, because of it turned out that taking a small step in our business, like just to deal with the waste, the low-grade waste conveyor belt, presented very, very high risk. So we had to take on tyres as well to de-risk the investment and to get it to a certain scale. So, basically over, when I say 10 years of assessment, it probably would have been like 7 years part-time and then 3 years full-time of really nailing down the technology that we're going to use, the products we're going to manufacture, the markets we're going to supply, our competitive advantages, what are they and do they exist, and how strong are they? So that all led us to where we are today.
If it's okay through you, Chair, your submission, I like the way you termed it in your submission. You said that tyre recyclers, yourselves included, must, quote, compete with landfill pricing, which is artificially low and does not reflect long-term environmental or social costs. So I couldn't have put it better myself. What is the typical cost, or what challenges are there for people such as yourselves and those people who've given evidence before you today, as opposed to just dumping it in a landfill site, putting a bit of dirt over it and forgetting it was ever used? What's the cost variation there?
Well, it does vary depending on where the landfill site is, of course. So, say for mining, for example, I mean they say to us that there's no cost to them for burial. Obviously, they which is probably essentially true, because it's just an internal cost for them. Okay, so therefore there's a massive cost difference between what we would charge versus what they can dispose of their tyres for currently. So it's significant. So we're talking, probably $400 or $500 a tonne difference there.
Do you think there should be a state, or even, dare I suggest, a federal mandate that tyres must be legally recycled?
I do, yes.
Why?
I do, because it's a resource that can be utilised, okay, and it can reduce emissions in manufacturing. Why? It's irresponsible to bury a resource that can be reused effectively and multiple times, as opposed to continually reusing virgin materials. So it's actually irresponsible to take that material out of a supply chain when it can be reused, and there's facilities available to do that processing.
And if there was a ban, if the government did decide to implement a ban, what do you think is a reasonable time frame to give companies time to adjust to that?
Well, if we're talking about mining companies, I would say 5 years.
5 years?
Yeah. I mean, the people can look at this a little bit like out of perspective, really. So a large mining company the volume of tyres that they produce is not that much. Okay, it sounds a lot when you talk to someone who hasn't been involved in the industry. But say one of the largest iron ore players in WA would produce about 8,000 tonnes a year. So it's not a huge amount for them to be able to progressively get that into a recycling process. So I think 5 years for that type of volume is more than enough time, and I think they've done the same type of thing in Chile. So there's that can be referenced about how the mining industry in Chile managed this, and they basically followed that process of a 5-year progressive implementation.
Okay, that's good.
Your submission, it's critical about TDF as a dominant pathway. So from a policy perspective, how should we distinguish between acceptable diversion from landfill and genuinely circular economies?
Well, I guess it's about what's the end use of this waste? Where is it going to go? So it should be probably a hierarchy of the destination of this material. So obviously, landfill is the lowest.
Yep.
And then it would step up from there. So I would say that's basically how you determine. Yeah.
So just base it on what the product usability, times it can be redone, the value add that it puts in.
Yeah, multiple things I'd say. Yeah, so value that it creates. It's new, probably its new life cycle. Can it be recycled again? Things like that should be assessed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've noted Australia's higher operating costs and reliance on export markets. So what market-based measures do you think would improve the competitiveness of recycled products made in Australia?
So, obviously we're doing, within the Australian market, a lot of products are imported into Australia, and it's difficult to compete with these imports. So, and those imports are also manufactured from waste tyres from another country, right? So, if, for example, there were tariffs on those products, to give the Australian manufacturers, given our higher cost of operating, a chance to compete with those imports, that would put us more on a level playing field with the imports. So tariffs as an example. Yeah.
Low quality tyre imports.
Yep.
We're seeing a lot more of that come in as single-use tyres, foam-filled tyres, all these, so-called technological advantages. Does that increase the difficulty in being able to recycle them with those sorts of things?
Well, it does. If, for example, you wanted to grow the retreading market, okay, a lot of these low-grade tyres that come in cannot be retreaded.
Yep.
Okay, because their casings are only designed for one use, and so that prevents recycling in that direction. But I think with what we do, for example, it potentially could, because we need to understand the compound that the tyre was manufactured from. So a lower grade tyre will give us a lower grade output. So it can have an impact in those value adding areas, but when it comes to things like crumb rubber or just TDF, it doesn't matter, no. Yeah.
How do you identify which one's a low grade? Is it
well, essentially it's price. If it's a low price tyre, it's highly likely it's a low grade product.
And most of it comes out of China?
Well, I'm not sure, to be honest. It would be Asia generally. Yep. So that could be Sri Lanka, Asia, India, China.
Through you, Chair, can I? Where is your company at now as far as employees are concerned? How many potentially, if you do know the answer, indirect jobs do you think your facility creates, so off-site? And if the ability to crank up the process were there, what would be the output, and how many employees' jobs could you further create in the future?
Okay, so at the moment we'd have, across two sites, we'd have about 50 employees. So we've gone from 16 employees to 50 in 8 months, okay, during this ramp-up phase, and we're currently ramping up. So with our current plant, when that's at full capacity, we expect around 90 employees. That's running at 24/7. If we expanded and basically doubled our production at our East Rockingham facility, the employee numbers would go to about 130.
What sort of tonnage are we talking there?
We would process around 45,000 tonnes a year of material in. Yeah.
Now, or that's in the future with it cranked up at full capacity?
At full capacity.
Full capacity.
Yep.
And there's no shortage of supply?
Well, look, it actually is. There is a shortage of supply. So when we are in Western Australia here, we struggle obviously with mining tyre. We get very little. The conveyor belt is up and down. Okay, so really, at the moment, when mining have permission to bury, their process of dealing with waste is they tend to accumulate it on site over a long period of time, and when that gets to basically a crisis point, they will call us and say, hey, we've got to remove all this belt, we need it moved quick. And then they'll just move enough to create the space again, and then they'll start to just... So our supply can be very up and down. And that's with conveyor belt, and with tyres was basically not flowing at all from mining. And then, of course, we've got the metropolitan supply. So the metropolitan supply is also, it's really dominated by a national player who's heavily into TDF, and trying to get that resource to recycle it and upcycle it is very, very challenging. So with the current state of play in the truck and passenger tyre collected from metropolitan areas, it is dominated by a national player who keeps that material within the TDF cycle. So it's very hard for a new entrant to come in to obtain some of that resource to value add it. So this is where we need to look at this and go, value adders need to have some type of incentive, or there needs to be perhaps an allocation type process where if you're a value adder, you get first preference to a set allocation of resource per year. Then the lower down the hierarchy you are, the lower the opportunity becomes for gaining resource. So if we want to get these materials into circularity, these are the types of changes that we have to bring in, and the current players aren't just going to work that out themselves.
In yesterday's tour, I was quite impressed with your R&D. Can you talk us through so that Hansard can have on record the commitment that you're making to research and development into higher end products and that sort of thing in the lab that you had there on site?
Yeah, sure. Yep, so obviously what we do involves a lot of R&D. Devulcanisation is still a little bit in its infancy really around the world. We have to take on a lot of the R&D ourselves, and we've chosen obviously to do that in-house so we can have total control. So we've got a on-site lab. We're bringing in a polymer engineer from India who's due to start with us probably about July, so that we can really make some strong progress in the R&D sector. So we want to further advance our ability to process the waste in a way to integrate it into other manufacturers' compounds, such as conveyor belt manufacturers, tyre manufacturers. And this is a real collaboration between a recycler and another manufacturer. So there's a lot of technical challenges to overcome, but to do that, it's a full-time resource and with personnel and equipment to achieve that outcome, basically.
If the state or federal government did one thing that would support your business, what would you see that being?
It would be just to ban landfilling.
Yeah,
Yeah, just to
simple as that.
bring both for mining and for general metropolitan-based tyres. I mean, there's a complete ban on landfill of that material. Yeah.
So with low-grade tyres, they increase the waste volumes if you can't utilise the product as much. I guess from a federal perspective, because we deal with a lot of importation, how could import standards or quality controls be designed to reduce that waste generation, but without the other challenge being consumer costs?
Well, that's probably difficult. Okay,
It's always a hard one, yeah.
Obviously, the higher the quality of the tyre, well, the cost will increase. Okay, but there potentially could be tax incentives as an idea to assist in that way. But I mean, ultimately, what will happen is, in the long term, buying a high quality tyre is a lower cost. Okay, but it's to get that message across, I guess, is the challenge, because a low grade tyre might last 30,000 kilometres and a high quality tyre will last 3 times as long. So,
do you think, like, knocking off the ability to bring in single-use tyres, for example, I mean, that's still parallel imports on older product, that would be helpful?
well, it's how you go about whether you do a complete ban on lower grade tyres coming into Australia is the way to go. I don't know, but it needs to be significantly reduced to reduce the amount of tyre waste that we're generating each year. So
We sort of learned yesterday that the cost between a single-use tyre and a better tyre, realistically, for the OEMs is, not a lot of money. The difficulty is then that we've got that waste product. And if we're not getting the ability to utilise it, well, we'll just, creating more headache for ourselves, aren't we?
well, that's right. Yeah. So I mean, I'm not across the new tyre game entirely, but I'm quite sure that America and Europe have a lot stricter standards than what Australia would do. Like, we're actually aligned with what most Asian countries would do in regards to their tyres that are used on vehicles. There's very low regulation, if any, and if there is any regulation, how is it being policed? As far as I'm aware, it's not being policed. It's more onto the importer to ensure they're bringing in tyres at a certain standard, but is that being policed? I highly doubt it.
Back to your tariffs or local content requirements on products manufactured overseas using the waste tyres, that would improve domestic recycling and sovereign manufacturing capability. Can you elaborate on that, which is in your submission?
So, well, there's, say for example, there's a lot of product coming in for the fitness, flooring and construction industry and so forth, right? So there's a lot of product that comes in. There's only one manufacturer in Australia, over in Queensland, that manufactures these products, and he would process around about 1,000 tonnes a month, and he really just focuses on Queensland. So then you would say, okay, there's a lot of material being imported right now to service New South Wales and Victoria and Western Australia, and the reason why that is because it's hard to compete with these imports right now. So and those imports are made from exactly the same material as what they would be made from here, which is waste tyre. So to level the playing field a little bit, we need to put tariffs on those products that are being imported, which would then boost the manufacturing of those products here in Australia using our own waste. So then you'd have our own waste going into products being consumed in Australia instead of waste from another country.
For the record, Corey, if it's okay, give us a bit of your background as to your career in tyres, your tireless efforts, so to speak, about, your involvement in the industry and what it means to you.
Well, we've been operating for 23 years, and I'm obviously the founding director of the business. We started out in conveyor belting. So when it comes to tyres, I guess I've been researching the tyre recycling industry now for, 10 years, part-time sort of, and then that transitioned into quite like a 3-year full-time role. So we've researched many different technologies and looked at all different opportunities that would be successful in Western Australia. So trying to come up with ideas on how to recycle and deal with this waste in a where we are located and what we have available to us, such as resources and markets and so forth. So to me, it's been a tough journey, I must admit. It's been very, very challenging to come up with a viable business model. It's been a long time, a lot of effort, a lot of investment. So it's very important to me that this is we see change and we see this comes to a successful outcome, and we see that there's lots of opportunity if the right policy and regulations are in place. So it's obviously I've got a lot of investment in personal time and financial investment in this industry now. So it's quite important that it's successful. Yeah.
You have read about experiences overseas. You may well have visited other nations, etc. Do you think Australia is behind the curve, online ball, or ahead of the curve when it comes to tyre recycling and what we're doing in a responsible, environmental and economic way to deal with the problem, and it is a problem, with old tyres?
Well, obviously we're a long way behind compared to some countries. Okay, North America, for example, but and most of Europe, I would say. So although in saying that, we recognise that we don't have the population for markets, which gives us a bit of a disadvantage. So whatever we do with tyres, to consume the volume and get it all into circularity, we've got to be able to export. So we are behind, but I guess the key reason we are behind is we don't have the right government support behind us. We don't have the right framework around us to develop, to get from where we are today to where we need to be and to catch up with countries like, North America and around Europe and so forth.
So, and I don't expect you to know the answer, although you may well. Tonnage per person, per capita. Is Australia, do we use more tyres per capita than perhaps, because of our mining, obviously, and our agriculture, do we use more tyres per person than people in, say, North America or Europe?
Look, I couldn't say for sure, but I would say that it's different segments. So when you look at, there's a rough rule of thumb that in a population, if you've got 1 million people, for example, there would be 1 million tyres generated per year. Okay, for passenger tyre.
Yep.
Okay, that's pretty much common, I think, around the world, most places of the world. But it can't. Obviously, we have a lot higher concentration of mining waste here, especially in Western Australia, because of what our economy is all about. So, I think it has to be compared from region to region based on what we're actually doing here in regards to mining and so forth.
One of the things that we know that state and federal governments are interested in is investing in more manufacturing, and the place where Australia can be more competitive is in advanced manufacturing. And let's say if a ban on mining tyres happens, have you seen good regulations that have existed to make sure that we're adding as much value to tyre waste as possible? And because I'm trying to get my head around how do we make sure that we're adding the most amount of value to old tyres and conveyor belts?
Well, okay, it's hard probably to regulate, but I think that would potentially self-regulate to a certain extent, because like for us, for example, we for mining tyres and mining waste, we're going to offer a far more competitive rate than, say, a TDF processor, because we're not so heavily reliant on gate fees.
Yeah.
Okay, where most of our income comes from the product that we sell. So the waste from mining would therefore, based on commercial reasons, would be more directed to a lower cost service provider, which is going to be someone who's valuating more because they are generating more income from the products that they manufacture.
So the market will pretty much sort it out.
Mostly, I would say, yeah. And again, I could say that it could be regulated. It could be regulated by a independent body where there's an allocation process going on. So if, for example, it was Tyre Stewardship Australia, if they managed the distribution of waste tyres to recyclers, and so if you're a recycler that's value adding and you say, okay, I'd like to have 50,000 tonnes a year because I need to manufacture this, that and the other, versus a TDF producer, okay, value adder, you get priority number one. So that's where that material goes, and whatever's left that the value adders don't need goes to the TDF producers.
You turn completely nuts, run for politics, become the chair, you supplant the member for McEwen as the chair of this inquiry, and you get to write the recommendations. What's your first recommendation that you'd like to see this committee produce? Being the eternal optimist that you are.
Absolutely ban landfilling.
Yeah.
It must happen. It really must. That is absolutely priority number one. Mm-hmm. Okay. Then it would be probably allocation to value adders to ensure that the material is being processed, and it gives incentive to value adders that want to come into the market. They're going to get a secure resource. And then from there on, the value adders can look after everything else, such as markets and everything else that follows from there. So it's about providing the industry with a secure resource one way or another. That's the type of regulation that people like myself want to see. We don't need government to look for markets. We don't need government to find technologies for us. We need you to give us the framework to operate in that gives us a secure supply of materials to process. And that underpins investment.
So you would argue that's not bold and innovative, that's just sensible.
Yeah, absolutely. We're the ones that are bold and innovative. We're the ones that understand markets. We're the ones that spend all of our business lives in
making the investments, taking the risks.
Yeah, that's because we're the ones that got to have these discussions with any type of financier and put a business model together. Government, I don't see that's their role, not at all. It's about providing the framework for us to operate in. And that really comes down to making sure we've got adequate supply of materials to process.
Thanks for your time.
Any more?
No, happy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Corey. Much appreciated.
No worries.
We'll
Thank you.
just Yep, just read that bit and then we'll suspend. So, thank you for your attendance today. You've been asked to provide any additional information forward to the Secretariat by 18th of May 2026. You'll be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence and have an opportunity to request corrections and transcription errors. So the committee now will suspend, and thanks, Corey. Much appreciated.
No worries. Thank you. Hopefully we see change.
set to go? You guys right? Yep. Cool. No, I don't care about you. I'm talking about the witnesses. We'll clear the meeting open. So I welcome representatives from the Western Australian Government to give evidence at this public hearing today. For the Hansard record, could you please each state your full name and the capacity in which you appear? I'll let you choose who goes first.
So Adrian Wiley, I'm the Executive Director of Circular Economy at the West Australian Department of Water and Environmental Regulation.
Good morning, I'm Kim Giddens, Parliamentary Secretary to the Honourable Matthew Swinburne, MLC, the Minister for the Environment.
Good morning, I'm Les Marchant, Director of Materials Engineering at Main Roads, Western Australia.
Good morning, Louis Bettini, Principal Advisor Sustainability from Main Roads, Western Australia.
Fantastic, thank you. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I should advise you these hearings are a formal proceeding of the Parliament. Consequently, they warrant the same respect as proceedings of the Parliament itself. Giving false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. Do you wish to make an opening statement?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I will. Welcome to WA. For those of you who are not from here, I know the member Swan is a very proud West Australian, so welcome home. I am here today as Parliamentary Secretary to the Honourable Matthew Swinburne MLC, Minister for the Environment, representing the West Australian Government, and I refer the committee to WA's written submission. The State Government aims for Western Australia to transition to a sustainable, low-waste future, powered by a circular economy and where our communities, economy and environments thrive. This is supported by the soon-to-be-released updated waste strategy and roadmap, Beyond Waste 2030, the WA 2050 net zero target and the state's clean energy transition, the Made in WA and Diversified WA policies, WA's Closing the Gap initiatives, and the state's infrastructure, science and technology plans and strategies. Together, these WA strategies and policies seek to enable innovation, investment and employment opportunities in the low-waste transition to achieve sustainable prosperity for the state through the move to a more circular economy and decarbonisation. End-of-life tyres are a persistent problem waste and illegal dumping issues are ongoing, particularly in parts of remote and regional WA where end-of-life tyres have lower recovery and higher disposal rates. WA recognises the valuable role that the tyre recycling industry plays in effectively managing most on-road tyres used on cars, buses and trucks, and their investment and effort to develop markets for end-of-life derived products and tyre-derived fuel. WA also recognises that the existing National Voluntary Tyre Stewardship Scheme, administered by Tyre Stewardship Australia, supports better environmental outcomes for tyres. Nevertheless, issues persist with illegally dumped tyres and poorly managed tyre disposals, both of which can impact people and the environment and be costly for communities and governments. At the June 2023 Environment Ministers meeting, WA agreed to lead a national project on options for end-of-life tyres, including off-the-road tyres and conveyor belts and rubber tracks. The project's findings were reported back to Environment Ministers at the December 2024 Environment Ministers meeting. The project identified three key and persistent issues. First, environmental and community impacts associated with poor tyre management, including illegal dumping, stockpiling and fire risks, particularly in regional and remote areas. Second, the loss of valuable resources, especially from off-the-road tyres, where recovery rates remain significantly lower and there are clear missed economic opportunities. And third, limitations in the current framework, including inequities, gaps in participation and behaviours that can undermine investment in better practice recovery. The project assessed a range of options and found that broad-based approaches such as regulated product stewardship appear most capable of addressing the range of issues. It also emphasised that any approach would need to be fit for purpose for the Australian context and implemented in a staged way, recognising market and infrastructure readiness. The project aimed to provide initial evidence to support further work, future cost-benefit analysis and formal assessment of options. Western Australia's submission to this inquiry reflects those findings. Importantly, moving outcomes for end-of-life tyres is not only a waste, improving outcomes is not only a waste and environmental issue, it's also an economic opportunity. Improving recovery, supporting high-value recycling and strengthening local markets for tyre-derived products aligns with the WA's government's Made in WA agenda, building local industry, supporting regional jobs and making better use of resources already within our economy. Thank you, Chair.
Does anyone else wish to make a statement? No? All good.
If you want. Thank you. Parliamentary Secretary, we've heard a number of people give evidence to this inquiry today. saying there should be a ban on landfill, tyres being used in landfill. Where do you think the WA government would sit with that, and whose responsibility should that be? Should it be a state thing, or should there be a nationwide ban imposed by the federal government on tyres going into landfill?
Yeah, thank you, Member, for the question. It's a good one. The project that WA led was a project on behalf of the other state jurisdictions, and it did look at what landfill mandates to ban landfill might look like. And what it did find was that while there may be a role for that, it was really important to ensure that the system was ready. So ensuring that there were cost-effective alternatives, ensuring that the infrastructure was in place and that market development was ready. So with those considerations, a landfill ban without giving consideration to those could lead to unintended consequences, and there's already a significant challenge around illegally disposed of tyres, particularly in regional and remote WA, and there is significant cost of those illegally disposed of tyres to the community. And you know, some of our smaller local government areas are the least placed to be able to afford the cost of that. So avoiding those unintended consequences would be an important consideration of any future policy decision.
Okay, thank you.
With having that discussion and leading that sort of thing, was there consideration, did you put a plan out of what concepts might be available to be able to do that, like a 5-year lead time? Could you look at, you know, stiffer penalties for people dumping? Because I'd imagine it'd be a significant cost to the WA economy to collect and get all these illegally dumped tyres. And, you know, in Victoria we have that problem again in rural and regional and outer areas where truckloads will just get dumped on the side of the road as, you know, the small amount of organised crime comes in. So did you go through and look at sort of what are the options available, how to be able to do that? How do we get a more mandatory scheme for returning, you know, for illegally dumped tyres and the carcasses, and how you can use it given, you know, the industries and places we've looked at yesterday. I think WA's got some really exciting stuff happening in the recycling area.
So sorry, if I understand the question, so my remit here today is to respond to WA's submission, and WA's submission is based strongly off of the report that WA led. So that report did look at, as I said already, that did look at what the consequences or the option of a mandate against landfilling tyres, but it was very high level. So this report here makes a number of findings but not recommendations, but it's probably fair to say there was a number of aspects to your question, sorry. I don't remember.
Yeah. Well, it's more about, like, because I know that WA was charged with looking at this on the, you know, across the states, but and you have the biggest issue being that we've heard, as Michael pointed out, the dumping of OTRs is the biggest straight into landfill, and then you've got the issue where rural councils, and as I said, Victoria has the same thing, where people are dumping it. The cost of, you know, when you look at the volume of a tyre into a municipal tip is about $20 per tyre. Did you look at how to mandate that, or anything to go into building a circular economy, having stronger penalties, etc., for people that are dumping? And, you know, because your recycling facilities, I think, you know, seem to be the best ones across the country. So how do you utilise to fix that to get more into them, to make them more profitable, larger scale, etc., and build them up?
There's kind of a number of issues inherent in your question, but in relation to the project, one of the key findings was that a broad-based national productship approach was it found that it had the highest score to respond to some of those challenges. So a national approach under a product stewardship scheme could provide different types of incentives for the investment into infrastructure to address some of the specific challenges that exist, not only within Western Australia, which is extremely diverse, but of course across Australia. In relation to infrastructure in WA, there has been some significant investment through the Recycle Modernisation Fund, and we do have now in Western Australia a number of facilities that can recycle tyres that didn't exist only a few years ago. So again, a landfill ban a few years ago would not have been effective because there wasn't a process available to deal with the tyres. We do have now some great investment and some very modern facilities, as you know, but again, a national product stewardship scheme was found to have the highest score to respond to some of those sorts of challenges. I don't know if Mr. Wiley wants to expand.
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Chair, as the Parliamentary Secretary says, the project that we undertook certainly did look at a range of options, including, as we've discussed, the option of a landfill ban, and did find that there may be some merits to these approaches once you've got the broader system in place to really provide the sort of revenue streams and the kinds of options that you might like to pursue to manage some of these perverse outcomes. And that was the principal finding, is that the landfill bans, could achieve some outcomes, and certainly we heard very strongly from industry and the recyclers who were providing feedback into the consultation that was the principal mechanism that they saw that needed to be enacted. But as the state government already managing large amounts of or significant cost of dumped tyres, we are very mindful of making that problem worse. So the findings of the project really did say that you wouldn't really want to consider a landfill ban until you had a product stewardship scheme in place, and that's because the product stewardship scheme would provide the opportunity to, say, put in place incentives that might draw these tyres out of regional areas, either through, say, transport subsidies or other things that you could potentially set up to try and manage some of these perverse outcomes. With our experience in trying to manage all sorts of illegal dumping at the moment, there is no sort of upper threshold on penalties or others that would effectively eliminate this problem. And Western Australia is a very large state with a lot of regional areas that people can potentially dump into. Trying to police those things is a very difficult task, and the last thing we want to do is make that problem harder before we've got the system in place to sort of provide the vehicles for recovering these tyres and really getting them to come back to where they should be.
And by the systems in place, do you mean like record keeping through start of life through to end of life? Is that what you mean?
I think there's certainly a data collection element to it, and we have been working very closely with Tyre Stewardship Australia, and the work that they do is exemplary, and they provide a lot of very high quality information into the review that we did, but they are hampered by the fact that they are working with a subset of the industry, and that their membership is limited. A mandatory scheme would of course have the ability to sort of collect a lot more data out of the system, and therefore that would help us to design the kinds of interventions and the kinds of subsidies or incentives that would be required to sort of effectively draw these tyres back out of landfill or out of illegal dumping.
So do you think you could maybe do a mandatory scheme that maybe like 5 years, giving people, governments, local government time to adjust, and companies as well?
If you're happy for me to keep talking about that. So I think what I would say about the work that we did is, as the Parliamentary Secretary has indicated, it was a very high level first pass. The discussions that we had with stakeholders all through the process was that if any of the options were pursued further, there would need to be a lot more detailed consultation that happened. And with the example of a product stewardship scheme, you would really want to get to that next level of detail and really consult on that. So I think that would be the first step, is to do some more detailed consultation with industry about how it would look like, and that could consider transition times and all those sorts of things that you might want to put in place. Yes.
An idea of what you spend a year on monitoring and cleaning up waste tyres that are illegally dumped?
Not from the department's perspective, but if you're okay, I might hand to Main Roads colleagues who have some more direct experience.
Yeah, so from a Main Roads perspective, it's in the order of around 200,000 per year in terms of what we as an organisation would spend on disposing of tyres that we've collected off the network. So yeah, there is. We don't speak for local governments. We don't actually have any information on that, but that cost would be far greater, I would say, for local governments.
If I can add to that answer, in the report that we released on this project, we did note that there was a 2024 study that looked at the costs to local government for the stockpiling and illegal dumping of tyres and found that it was at least in the order of $6.5 million per year to clean up end-of-life tyres that have been illegally disposed. So that is one number, but I think one of the challenges is there are disparate data sets here that aren't aggregated, so we don't know the full cost.
This is probably a question to the Main Roads team. One of the bits of information that we've heard is about the incorporation of tyre crumb into roads and asphalt, and it's been implied that some of the work that Main Roads has been doing has been nation leading. Can you talk a little bit about how that kind of approach has gone and some of the benefits, but maybe also some of the challenges, both from a practical use perspective, but also from an environmental perspective, like benefits and challenges?
Yes, sure. Thank you for the question, Honourable Member. Look, it's a long journey, and we're talking about bans in the first questions. All of these things you need, if you're going to have a ban, you need to have the opportunities. What are you going to do with those tyres otherwise? So we've commenced our renewed research essentially in 2018 in crumb rubber. We used to use a lot of crumb rubber in our bitumen spray sealing back in the 1970s, when probably most of our spray sealing was crumb rubber back in the 1970s, 1980s. We outsourced all of our road maintenance and construction in the late 1990s, and that crumb rubber product dropped off. And so we had 10 years where we went backwards on our crumb rubber. So we've been on a slow process in the 2000s to rebuild that. Now that we've brought our road maintenance back in-house and we have more direct control over what products we use and where, we've been able to ramp up our renewed push for crumb rubber in bitumen spray seals. So there's massive environmental benefits in using crumb scrap rubber, mostly from tyres, that it's not going to landfill and it's not being dumped or it's not being burnt. It's going into bitumen, and it gives you longer life. So it's one of these recycled products that help give us much better long-term sustainability outcomes with whole of life cycle benefits, reduced maintenance intervention, which now reduces your carbon footprint of future maintenance, and there's an engineering benefit. I don't want to get into the technical detail, but
I want you to. Just at a high level.
Look, the secret is not to dissolve the rubber. The secret is only to partially digest the rubber into the bitumen. And what you get there is if you leave, so we have to crumb the rubber into small particles, less than 1 millimetre size, so they're currently about 0.6 millimetre size. We want to leave a particle in there that's about 0.4 millimetre size. We build flexible pavements here, not rigid pavements, like many pavements. New South Wales is rigid pavement. We have flexible pavements. So our pavements flex into the ground about 1 millimetre with every truck axle that goes over, and that it's like a paperclip bending a paperclip. If we have these rubber particles embedded in the bitumen and it's all integrated into the bitumen seal, that takes the tensile stresses. So as the pavement bends and flexes, the rubber is taking all that tensile energy and stopping the bitumen from cracking. So that's the benefit of bitumen. That technology was developed in the 1960s, 1970s. Victoria and Western Australia were the leaders in that technology. Victoria is still doing quite a bit of crumb rubber spray sealing. What we've done in the from 2018 onwards is now put rubber into asphalt, and we're using that same technology to help stop that fatigue cracking of an asphalt layer. Tyre Stewardship Australia sponsored Main Roads Western Australia to attend a Australian Flexible Pavement Association international study tour to South Africa, where they are using up to 25% crumb rubber in their asphalts and their bitumens. So we had 3 weeks of pretty intensive studies visiting various asphalt plants, bitumen producers, road asset maintenance managers, and asphalt. So asphalt is it's a concrete, except instead of cement, it's got bitumen in it. It's pretty much a hard, inflexible material. You put 25% crumb rubber and you can bend this. It's quite incredible. It's very difficult to get to 25%. So we've had to bite this off in chunks. 18% has been quite easy, or relatively easy, but that's still taken 3 years of research in our laboratories, going through, well, also testing the safety of it, making sure that it's not generating any fuming during production that could be hazardous, as well as making sure that it's a stable product to use, getting the workability right, making sure that we're accommodating those rubber particles within the stone skeleton of the asphalt without displacing the aggregate, so that we do get those flexural benefits. And that then gives us that 20 to 30% extra life, but it requires a bit more management when you get into high percentage rubber.
So it saves on maintenance costs. Is there a sense of what it means from a fuel efficiency for a vehicle driving on it, would there not be?
Not really. There's no significant change to, no measurable change to the efficiency of a vehicle driving on it. But what it does do as the road user is, if something lasts 30% longer, then you're not disrupting traffic as often to replace it. So there are road user benefits and road user decarbonisation benefits towards net zero emissions in that space.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For the probably a question for you guys now. What we heard from the tyre manufacturers or the tyre recyclers is there's so much amazing innovation and I'm going to say advanced manufacturing here in Western Australia, which is fantastic to see. It also sounds like they have an ability to increase their throughput of their plants, and the message that we got from them, what they would love to see is a banning of landfill, but in particular in the resource sector. They see these really big tyres that are just being chucked in a hole. Would your preference be for that, like if we're going to go down that track, for that to be a federal approach where we look at that nationwide, or would this be something that the state government would consider without there being a national approach?
So again, to go to WA's submission and particularly drawing on the findings from the project, it did look at off-road tyres in the mining sector, and in WA, of course, you need no telling about this. Our mining sector is a significant driver not only of our economy here in WA, but actually of the nation. It's very important to our state. I think it's probably worth noting a number of things. Again, going back to the earlier comments about unintended consequences, ensuring that the whole system is ready is an important point. But also recognising that the mining sector as a whole, we talk about it as one thing, but it's quite diverse in and of itself. So, we think of our big miners, the Rios, the BHPs and the FMGs and so forth. But of course, Western Australia has a significant number of smaller operators that operate not only in the Pilbara but through the goldfields and into the Kimberley region, and even down the southwest. So just sort of again, one of the key sort of findings from the project was that a one-size-fits-all approach would be unlikely to be effective in the Australian context. We must be looking at how to respond to the needs in specific circumstances for specific industries, and so that would be an important next step. But also what it does say is that off-road tyres in particular are potentially high value in terms of what can be recovered from that, and so I think there's opportunities to look really strongly at how we can embed circular economy principles and drive economic diversification by looking at how we can reuse those. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Probably the only thing that I would say in addition to that is that when we're looking at roles and responsibilities between federal and state, the state government already has a regulatory role around the management of landfills and the like, so we're well placed to operate in that space. The federal government is much better placed to do product stewardship well. So if there was anything that the federal government should be doing, it is in that product stewardship space, because really what you need from an effective product stewardship scheme is national consistency, and we know from attempts to do product stewardship at a state-based level, it can be very successful, but you ultimately end up with businesses trying to engage in different rules and different arrangements across different jurisdictions. So I think, to come back to the findings of the report, product stewardship is really where the first step should be, and that should be at a national level.
That was a very good handball. Love it. Tell me, are your councils under pressure with landfill capacity? Have they raised this as an issue? I know on the East Coast, certainly after some of the most severe floods that we've had, and so many homes, contents destroyed in recent years particularly, tips run by local government are really under pressure with the airspace they have left to fill. And given the fact that there are so many mining conglomerates here in WA, and I appreciate it's a massive, massive state, but still, are your local councils feeling the strain of, limited capacity as far as landfill?
If I could address that in terms of the tyre issue, I'd note that very few tyres are ending up in, regional, local government managed landfills. So for the most part, when we talk about landfilling, or in fact what came through the feedback from the consultation that the mining industry refers to it more as on-site disposal, we are talking about within the bounds of the mining tenement. The mining industry or the mining company in question will have a landfill, or in some cases maybe disposing of these tyres within their existing landforms that they're constructing. So I don't think the tyres are creating a challenge for landfill capacity. That certainly wasn't something that came through in the feedback. More broadly, we are of course watching our interstate colleagues around landfill capacity. We know that certain jurisdictions over east have had significant landfill capacity challenges. Our data to this date does not suggest that we're in that space.
But it wouldn't help you to agree with that, I suppose. Well, the more tyres, the more environmental hazard.
That's right.
Yeah, our objective is always to try and minimise landfilling of any product, but I think in the case of tyres, that is not placing the pressure on the addressable landfills.
Thank you, Mr. Waters.
Just back to the using rubber crumb in roads. Did you do any work on where it's leaching any products into the environment when used in road base?
Yes, we've done, as part of our research, we did do quite a lot of environmental investigation and safety investigation. So the crumb rubber is, we're not doing dry blending of crumb rubber. We, very early in our program, in our asphalts, we decided we would get more benefits from the wet blending of crumb rubber. So there's no actual dry crumb rubber particles replacing stone aggregate. What we're using the crumb rubber is digesting it into the bitumen. So it's bound in the bitumen layer. there's no. So the first things we've looked at is health for the workers making that manufacture. So we've done a lot of emissions measurements, and we've got controls in our specifications to make sure that that's all safe. In terms of environmental leaching, it's bound in the bitumen, so the bitumen doesn't leach. It's on the road surface, so it's placed on hard granular materials, so there's no leaching more than about 2 or 3 millimetres into those hard granular materials. We also did look at, can this wear off? So on our sprayed seals, traffic is driving on the stone, not on the bitumen. Initially on asphalt, there's a little bit of bitumen on the top surface of the asphalt, and that will contain a little bit of, well, so it'll contain 18% rubber in that top surface of bitumen, but that top surface of bitumen, you're talking about a few microns or tens of microns thickness, and that does wear off. So we did have a look at that. We did a comparison. So, well, the reason why car tyres become scrap is because the rubber wears off them and you lose your tread. And where is that lost? It's lost on the road surface. So the amount of rubber that is lost by bitumen rubbing off, being worn off the asphalt, is many orders of magnitude lower than the amount of rubber that is worn off the road users' tyres, the truck tyres, the car tyres. Where is that rubber going? That rubber is being worn off during driving, and so it's insignificant in comparison to the rubber that's already coming off the road from the tyres themselves.
All good. All good. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance today. If you've been asked to provide any additional information, please forward to the Secretary by the 18th of May 2026. You'll be sent a copy of the transcript for your evidence and have an opportunity to request corrections to transcription errors. So thank you very much and appreciate your time. Good evidence.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
How long are you here for?
In Perth, our budget's not.
just about to. So I now welcome representatives from the WA Local Government Association to give evidence in the public hearing today. For the Hansard record, could you each please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear?
Nicholas Amon Sloan. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Western Australian Local Government Association.
Rebecca Brown, Manager of Waste and Environment at the WA Local Government Association.
Fantastic. Although the committee does not require to give evidence under oath, I should advise you these hearings are a formal proceeding of the Parliament. Consequently, they warrant the same respect as proceedings of the Parliament itself. Giving false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. Do you wish to make a short opening statement?
Thanks very much, Chair. And can I just start by just apologising to you and obviously to the Secretary for the confusion with the starting time this afternoon now. Rebecca and I are very pleased to be here. So thank you for the opportunity to present today, and in particular for coming to Western Australia for this hearing. As mentioned, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Western Australian Local Government Association. We're the peak industry body that represents the state's 139 local governments. The local government sector welcomes this inquiry and the opportunity it provides to move forward towards a more circular economy approach for tyres. I'm going to focus on the challenges and opportunities for local government in Western Australia regarding tyre use, recovery and disposal, and our experience with product stewardship. So Western Australia is about 33% of the Australian landmass, but only 11% of the population. In all, we have 139 local governments with significant variation in population, geographic size, rate base and capacity. From the metropolitan city of Stirling, which has a population of over 224,000 people and an area of 105 square kilometres, to the Shire of East Pilbara, which is the largest local government in the world, with a population of only 11,000 residents, but an area of 372,000 square kilometres. Across WA, local governments provide waste services for their residents, and tyres do represent a significant challenge. In both metropolitan and regional areas, limited, accessible and affordable disposal options leads to stockpiling and illegal dumping, creating environmental and health risks within communities. Tyres are among the most common illegally dumped materials managed by local governments at a significant cost. The cost to recycle tyres is significant, particularly for regional areas where transport costs are added to the overall recycling costs. Local government is often the service provider of last resort in regional areas, so we are dealing with not only tyres from residents, but the agricultural and mining sector. So WALGA and local government have been advocating for an effective product stewardship scheme for tyres for many years. Providing input into the development of the current voluntary scheme in 2013, WALGA identified the need for a mandatory approach if voluntary was not effective. So after 5 years of the voluntary scheme, WALGA identified that it was not meeting the needs of the community and local government and opposed its re-accreditation by the ACCC. Now, after over 15 years of a voluntary approach, recycling costs are still high and illegal dumping of tyres prevalent. There are opportunities. The tyre export ban has driven Australian and state government and private sector investment in tyre recycling facilities. However, this investment does not address the cost to transport and recycle tyres, which is the biggest barrier to recovery because the value of the resource is not sufficient. Tyre Stewardship Australia's levy is 25 cents per passenger tyre. It costs more than $10 per tyre to recycle, which is a significant gap. So WALGA considers mandatory product stewardship, which fully covers the cost of collecting, transporting and processing tyres for recovery, is essential to increase resource recovery and minimise illegal disposal. We've seen what an effective mandatory product stewardship scheme can do with Containers for Change. It has not only more than doubled the recycling of eligible containers and virtually eliminated them in the litter stream, but generated more than 800 jobs statewide and provided significant social benefit, with many refund points being run by charities, and in our Kimberley region, all of the refund points run by Aboriginal corporations. A fully loaded and effective scheme will enable increased recovery of tyres, including in regional and remote areas, while supporting the development of processing infrastructure and markets, providing support to local governments to manage illegally dumped tyres within their communities, and increasing jobs and providing an environment to encourage innovation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your evidence and for appearing, and thank you for the work local government does, because it's the first form of government. Some might even argue the most important form of government.
We're happy to make that argument, if you like.
Sure, let's not mislead Hansard. Just joking. Can I just ask, if there were to be a ban placed on dumping of tyres, who should put that in place? A state government or a federal government, or dare I say, should it be at local council level?
I think before we start talking about bans, I think we've got to talk about the importance of product
Let's say
stewardship
mandate.
that.
Let's use a nicer term.
I don't think we have a position on that, Rebecca.
So we don't support landfill bans unless there is an effective product stewardship scheme in place. Banning something to landfill doesn't fix the problem because it needs somewhere to go and it needs to be funded, particularly for our regional local governments. The cost to recycle tyres is really significant. They don't have local recycling. They're transporting tyres thousands of kilometres to Perth where the facilities are. So a landfill ban would follow the implementation of an effective product stewardship scheme potentially as basically a safety net.
So a product stewardship scheme, I think you're in the room when the WA government representatives were here and the Parliamentary Secretary, the Environment Minister was giving evidence, Kim Giddens. Who should put a product stewardship
scheme in place? The Australian government is best placed for products which are sold into a national market, such as tyres. It makes most economic and efficiency sense for the Australian government to do it. They've done it before. The used oil product stewardship scheme that's been in place since I think 2001 is
an excellent scheme, I might add.
Oh yeah,
I'm all for it.
The used oil scheme has been incredibly successful and has literally driven investment in oil to oil recycling. The e-waste
my
scheme.
hometown in Wagga Wagga, in fact.
Really? Yeah. Yeah, we have a facility in Bunbury because of that scheme. That it's helped investment. The e-waste scheme has been very successful. There's some challenges with it at the moment, but that's a national scheme.
If I could continue, Chair, with there's been considerable investment in tyre recycling made in WA. It could be argued from what we've seen yesterday, you were actually leading the country in that regard. What could local councils do to encourage further investment in such processes?
For local governments, local governments probably have a role in assisting the community through collection of tyres. They very much aim to do so in a cost-effective manner. As I say, where they're limited is tyre recycling is still very expensive, and a local government doesn't necessarily have the financial or legislative levers to change the sort of overall market settings, which is what's required.
Are your tips, if I could just continue, are your tips, I know on the East Coast there are real problems with tips filling up, and they're worried about where they're actually going to find more land to build more tips for the future. And I think it's one of the great moral and environmental challenges of our time is landfill. I mean, you buy a shirt these days, there's so much bits of plastic and pins and cardboard and goodness knows what else. I mean, it all ends up in landfill. Is this an issue in WA for your 139 councils? Are some of them, particularly those in peri-urban areas and closer to Perth, filling up and worried about where you're going to have the future tips?
So there is an ongoing discussion about landfill capacity, as the previous evidence indicated. Landfill capacity for the metropolitan area isn't so much of a challenge. There is definitely issues, various regional areas. What we're seeing is actually landfills being developed in areas where the local community and the local government does not want them to be developed.
Nobody wants a tip near them. Nobody wants anything built near them these days.
There are definitely appropriate locations, and a lot of the focus of our discussions with government and with our members is around managing waste as close to source as possible. So you do want to have capacity, and you mentioned before about emergency events and filling up landfills. That is absolutely a challenge for particularly some of our northern local governments who are still in the recovery process from the Kimberley floods, which effectively filled up a local government landfill. So tyres are a challenge in landfill to manage, but they are not in and of themselves the biggest challenge in terms of our capacity. But effective planning at the state and regional level for future waste facilities is essential.
And I guess I made the observation in relation to investment in infrastructure and facilities, local governments generally they're particularly in regional Western Australia, smaller local governments are financially constrained, so they obviously prioritise investment in critical infrastructure, maintaining their services to their communities. Investment over and above that in particularly the provision of infrastructure that arguably is responsibility of other levels of government is a really significant challenge for the sector.
Thank you.
I grew up in regional WA, and one of the things that I'm very conscious of is how big WA is and how tough it is, like, dealing with waste in remote and far communities. I feel like there's not a simple solution for dealing with that, but do you have some ideas on if there was a product stewardship scheme in place, how we could help our remote and regional councils?
Absolutely. A fully funded product stewardship scheme can recover products from across Western Australia, across the country. As Nick mentioned, we use the example of our container deposit scheme. That is a state-based scheme, not for lack of pushing for a national scheme, but through, on purchase price, the cost of recycling is included. And that is recovery from across Western Australia. There are other ways to design product stewardship schemes, but by the time people have a product and it reaches the end of life, they don't really have the same incentive to pay for its disposal. If the cost to recycle is embedded in how much it costs, and you design a scheme to be efficient and effective, you can recover products from pretty much anywhere, because the products were taken there in the first place. So if they can be transported there, they can be recovered from there.
What would be the best way to price that in? And so for a container deposit scheme, you pay that 10 cents up front. What do you think would be the neatest way to do this for tyres?
On most product stewardship schemes, it is on purchase price. There is a levy of some kind, which covers the costs. There's a fair bit that goes into designing a product stewardship scheme, but it's basically working out what it's going to cost and putting that price on. At 25 cents a tyre at the moment, which is what TSA are collecting, is not going to cover those costs.
Do you have an indication of what a good price would be?
No. That, as I say, there's a lot that goes into developing a product stewardship scheme and working out what that looks like, but it is absolutely something that is doable. There are mandatory product stewardship schemes in other countries which are recovering over 90% of tyres. And they're in countries which are big, like Australia. So it is possible. There are examples where it has occurred, and we need Australian government to support the introduction of a mandatory scheme.
And I think that's been one of the really interesting benefits associated with the container deposit scheme is the associated benefits that have come out in terms of regional economic development, the creation of job opportunities, and you're very familiar with how remote some parts of our state are, but yet what they all have in common is an intersect either with the agricultural or the mining sectors. So there are great opportunities and great synergies there to look at what benefits might flow out of the introduction of a mandatory product stewardship scheme.
I can ask another question. Yeah. For some of our manufacturers, their perception is that from a passenger tyre perspective, the market's doing pretty well, but for off-the-road tyres, and in particular the mining industry, that's the area where we're struggling the most from a recycling rate. Do you have any thoughts or observations on that? And so basically what the implication is that passenger tyres are fine, don't touch that. What the issue is enforcement of the rules, but rather it's the resource sector that's doesn't have the right incentives in place.
We would see the problem would be all tyres, passenger tyres included. That's predominantly what local governments are seeing illegally dumped. Main roads have different challenges with the size of their roads. They may see some of those larger tyres, but illegal dumping includes passenger tyres. So we wouldn't say that passenger tyres are fine. It's still a huge cost. over $11 per tyre to recycle a passenger tyre. For a local government in a regional area where you've got that cost and the transport costs, that's still significant. For the mining sector, we've certainly had feedback from our local governments. They try and do the right thing, try and recycle the tyres even with those costs. The mining sector doesn't have the same obligation. So yes, mining sector tyres definitely a challenge, and that's what the data shows. There's very low recovery rates and significant amounts of tyres obviously going particularly to our northern regions.
And if I could just add a bit of context for scale from a local government perspective, I know there was a question there in relation to the cost to recover tyres from a main roads perspective in Western Australia. Local governments are responsible for maintaining over 87% of the road network in Western Australia, so we're talking in excess of 120,000 kilometres worth of the road network. So that probably provides some sort of context relative to the task that Main Roads described.
Do you know how much we spend on disposing tyres in WA from a local government perspective?
There was some data nationally, wasn't there? Which effectively I think is about $6.4 million nationally from a local government perspective.
From illegal dumping, but that's not how much local governments are spending on tyre recycling.
Cool. Thank you.
I might ask, given the road network that you have to look after, and there's never enough money coming out of Canberra for local roads, irrespective of who's in government, that's what local government will always tell you. I can see you nodding for the record.
We're very grateful for the support we get from the government.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. Are you excited about the prospect of tyre recycling, tyre crumb being used for road base, and the opportunities that could entail for the future?
Yeah, unquestionably. We're doing a significant amount of work with Main Roads. I think, speaking to my colleagues in other jurisdictions, I think there's a degree of sort of envy in terms of the strength of the relationship we have with Main Roads Department of Transport here in Western Australia. So there's a significant amount of co-investment in the research into the use of recycled materials into the road network in WA. And I think discussions such as these and the potential pathway where we're going to see significantly more tyres moving into that sort of recycled pathway only adds to the opportunities with the market getting more engaged and more involved in what we're trying to do. So we absolutely echo the comments made previously.
Thank you, and thank you for doing what you're doing for Road Base. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, thank you for your attendance today. If you've been asked to provide any additional information, please forward to the Secretary by 18 May 2026. You'll be sent a copy of the transcript for your evidence, and we'll have the opportunity to request corrections to transcription errors. There being no further witnesses, I declare this public hearing closed, and the next meeting of the committee is scheduled for Thursday, 30th of April at 11 AM for site visiting.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.